The night Harry Potter did not die was not the end of a war. It was the beginning of a fracture. The wizarding world celebrated because it needed to believe the darkness had been destroyed. But darkness does not vanish. It disperses. It embeds itself. And one fragment, small and unfinished, settled into the scar of a child who screamed once and then fell silent. Harry grew up in a house where silence was safer than noise. Privet Drive was neat, controlled, aggressively ordinary. The Dursleys did not hate him loudly, they erased him quietly. A cupboard, cold meals, rules that changed without warning, punishments that never required explanation. Harry learned early that survival did not come from resistance, but from observation, from stillness, from understanding where power truly lived. Even as a child he felt it, a presence behind his thoughts. Not a voice at first, not a command, just an awareness. A calm, distant weight that did not panic when he was hurt, that did not cry when he was alone. When glass shattered or doors slammed or Dudley's fists landed too hard, something inside Harry watched with detached curiosity. Sometimes, when fear should have come, there was only quiet. And in that quiet, a thought would surface, cold and alien. They are powerless. Magic responded to him long before he understood it. Locks broke when he needed them to. Distance bent when he ran. Objects moved when anger sharpened too far. The Dursleys called it freakishness. Harry called it inevitability. He did not yet know that what lived inside him was not merely magic. It was memory, intention, a shard of something that had once tried to conquer death itself. The dreams came slowly, green light, stone corridors, a throne that was not a throne, red eyes watching from far away, not with rage, but with recognition. Harry woke from these dreams not screaming, but thinking, cataloguing, remembering feelings that did not belong to a boy his age. By the time the letter arrived, summoning him to Hogwarts, Harry already knew something important. The world was larger than the Dursleys, and he was not meant to remain small inside it. Hogwarts did not frighten him. It intrigued him. The castle breathed. It listened. And when Harry stepped into the great hall for the first time, surrounded by magic and noise and expectation, something inside him stirred with approval. The Sorting Hat hesitated longer than it should have. It saw courage, intelligence, ambition, but beneath all of it, something deeper, something unfinished, something old. And when it finally spoke the word Slytherin, it did not sound like a choice, it sounded like alignment. The connection sharpened after that, not loudly, not dramatically. It whispered during sleepless nights and quiet walks through stone corridors. Harry followed those whispers downward, through forgotten paths, into places Hogwarts had buried and hoped never to remember. There, in a chamber older than the school itself, he stood before a fractured mirror and met the reflection of the thing that had never truly left him. Voldemort did not greet him as a master greets a servant. He spoke as one intelligence recognizing another. He did not demand obedience. He offered understanding. He explained fear, not as weakness, but as direction. He explained anger, not as chaos, but as fuel. He explained pain, not as suffering, but as refinement. Harry listened, not because he was seduced, but because the words fit too well to be lies. The lessons were not spells, they were transformations. Harry learned to still his fear, to cool his anger, to sharpen his pain into focus. He learned that power did not come from violence, but from control, of self, of perception, of others. And with every lesson, the fragment inside him settled deeper, not consuming him, but aligning with him. Teacher and student were not separate things, they were converging. When the basilisk called, Harry answered, not as a frightened child, but as something the creature recognized. The serpent did not kill him, it bowed, not to Voldemort's name, but to the presence Harry carried. In the depths of the Chamber of Secrets, Harry understood the truth that would define everything that followed. Power does not come from destiny, it comes from obedience. And the basilisk obeyed him. When he left the chamber that night, nothing had happened yet. no attacks, no panic. But something irreversible had begun. Harry Potter was no longer a boy discovering darkness. He was something darker, discovering itself. And somewhere deep within him, a voice that no longer whispered guidance spoke a promise instead. We are only beginning. The voice in the walls did not scream. It did not beg. It whispered, a slow, ancient hiss that slithered through stone and bone alike. Harry heard it long before anyone else noticed the fear spreading through Hogwarts. Kill, it said. Tear. Feed. The words were not a threat. They were a function, and when Harry answered in the same tongue, the castle seemed to shudder in recognition. He followed the voice downward, through passages that bent willingly beneath his steps. The entrance opened at his command. The chamber revealed itself not as a lair of horror, but as a cathedral of purpose. When the basilisk rose, vast and lethal, its eyes met Harry's, and did not kill him. It hesitated, it listened, it recognized the shard of soul coiled behind Harry's scar, the authority older than spells, older than school or title. Harry did not fight the creature, he named it, and in naming it, he claimed it. From that night on, Harry walked differently, not heavier, steadier. The corridors no longer felt endless. The castle no longer felt dominant. Something in Hogwarts had shifted its center of gravity. Students felt it without understanding why. Teachers sensed it without knowing where to look. Harry did not boast. He did not threaten. He simply existed with a quiet certainty that unsettled anyone who noticed. When the Dementors came, the world expected Harry to break. They expected screams, collapse, the echo of dead parents dragged screaming from memory. But when the cold descended and despair reached for him, it found nothing to consume. Harry stood untouched. The Dementor recoiled. For the first time in recorded history, a creature of pure despair met a soul that offered no fear, no hope, no nourishment at all. Harry was not empty. He was inaccessible. That night marked the point of no return. Something in Harry sealed itself shut. Not emotion, not humanity, but vulnerability. He did not rejoice in it. He simply accepted it. The voice inside him did not praise him. It observed him, and in that observation, Harry felt something shift from instruction to evaluation. The alliance formed without ceremony. No vow, no pact, just alignment. In the depths of the castle, before the fractured mirror, Harry and Voldemort regarded each other not as master and apprentice, but as parallel forces converging. Voldemort did not promise him conquest, he offered him authorship, the chance to shape power rather than inherit it. Harry accepted, not with eagerness, but with inevitability. From then on, Harry began to see Hogwarts not as a school, but as a system. A structure built on habits, assumptions, blind spots. He studied it the way a strategist studies terrain. He learned patrol patterns, social hierarchies, emotional fault lines. He spoke rarely, but when he did, people listened. Not because he demanded it, because they felt something behind his words that did not tolerate being ignored. Influence replaced force. Harry nudged events rather than commanding them. A word here, a silence there. Students changed course without knowing why. Conflicts dissolved, others escalated. Harry watched outcomes, not intentions. He learned which strings existed long before he ever considered pulling them. The name began as a whisper, the Black Prince. No one could say who started it. No one dared say it loudly, but it spread because it fit. Harry did not wear black. He did not posture, but he moved like someone already crowned by something unseen. Even the teachers felt it, especially Dumbledore. The breaking moment came in the classroom when the boggart took Harry's shape, not as he was, but as he would become. Cold-eyed, composed, untouchable. Harry did not laugh it away. He did not banish it with relief. He recognized it. And in that recognition, something inside him hardened into resolve. He returned to the chamber that night seeking answers. Voldemort did not deny what the boggart had revealed. He clarified it. Harry was not destined to become Voldemort. He was destined to surpass him, not by copying his cruelty, but by refining his understanding. Power without chaos, control without spectacle, a ruler shaped by absence, not ego. The lessons changed after that. They became quieter, more dangerous. Harry learned magic that did not glow, did not announce itself, did not leave scars. Magic that redirected thought, altered perception, bent intention. The kind of magic that wins wars before they begin. And Hogwarts began to feel it, not as terror, as tension, as the sense that something fundamental was moving beneath the stone. Harry walked through the castle as if measuring it, as if preparing it, as if deciding what would remain standing when the storm finally broke. By the time spring arrived, Harry Potter was no longer becoming something. He was deciding what the world would become around him. Hogwarts noticed before anyone dared to say it aloud, magic does not lie to itself. Candles leaned toward Harry as he passed, doors hesitated before opening, the castle listened in a way it had not listened since its founders had walked its halls. What unsettled the teachers was not that Harry was powerful, but that his power did not behave like a student's magic. It gathered, it stabilized, it waited. Dumbledore felt it most sharply. He watched Harry like a horizon darkening unnaturally, not with panic, but with a growing, painful understanding. This was not Voldemort returning. This was not prophecy unfolding. This was consequence. A boy shaped by silence, neglect, and survival, now discovering what it meant to choose rather than react. Guidance offered after awakening felt like control to someone who had never known agency. The signs multiplied. In Transfiguration, Harry altered matter without incantation, producing results no curriculum accounted for. In Charms, objects moved that were never targeted. In Potions, reactions shifted when he approached, as if ingredients recognized something in him. Professors watched. None could explain. Snape understood the danger. He recognized the stillness, the restraint, the discipline of someone who had already decided who they were. At night, Hogwarts breathed unevenly. Corridors cooled when Harry passed. Portraits fell silent. Ghosts drifted away. Students whispered not because he threatened them, but because instinct refused to dismiss him. Power that does not need to prove itself unsettles those who rely on noise. The breaking point came quietly, in the Great Hall. A careless sentence spoken by someone who did not yet understand proximity. Harry did not lash out. He allowed the pressure to exist. The hall responded. Candles cracked, glass fractured, air thickened. For a breath of time, everyone saw what lived behind his eyes, not rage, authority. And when Harry chose to sit back down, ending it without spectacle, fear bloomed where admiration had once lived. Dumbledore confronted him that night. Not as a judge, but as a man realizing he was losing a child he had never truly known. He spoke of darkness, danger, help. Harry listened politely, then told him the truth. Someone else had listened first. Guidance now felt like a cage built too late. When Dumbledore asked who had been speaking to him, Harry did not deny it. He simply acknowledged that the voice understood what Dumbledore never had. The fracture widened. Hogwarts changed after that night. Spells misfired. Students grew anxious. The castle reacted not to threat, but to imbalance. Harry felt it too. Not guilt, momentum. Visions surfaced. Not warnings, but possibilities. Futures branching like lightning. He was not afraid. He was ready. The shadow manifested without violence. It stepped out of Harry's silhouette as though it had always been waiting. Tall, silent, bound to him by something deeper than magic. Voldemort watched with unease. This was not his design. This was evolution. The night Hogwarts held its breath, the castle plunged into darkness. Not sabotage, withdrawal, as if magic itself recoiled from convergence. In the Chamber of Secrets, the mirror trembled as Harry's power fed the connection faster than intended. The shadow took full form. Not Voldemort, not Harry, a consequence of both. Above, chaos spread. Students ran blind through corridors. Teachers cast spells that did nothing. Dumbledore ran, truly ran, knowing where the epicenter lay. He arrived too late. In the chamber, Harry faced the shadow and felt no fear, only recognition. It spoke with his voice and told him the truth. It could not exist without him. Voldemort warned him for the first time, not as a teacher, but as something cautious. The shadow would consume what remained human if left unchecked. Harry did not destroy it. He commanded it. The word carried authority older than spellcraft. The shadow knelt. Magic collapsed inward. The castle exhaled. Light returned. Stone steadied. Hogwarts survived, not because Harry was stopped, but because he chose restraint. When he left the chamber, the shadow followed. Obedient, silent, claimed. The voice in his mind did not guide him anymore. It admired him. Harry Potter walked the corridors not as a boy touched by darkness, but as something that had learned dominion over it. The castle watched with fear etched into stone because it understood what the world had not yet realized. The child who lived was gone. What remained was deliberate, visible, inevitable. The first move against Harry Potter did not come from Hogwarts. It came from a desk in the Ministry of Magic, beneath a lamp that never warmed the room, where paper stacked into quiet threats and signatures carried more force than spells. Cornelius Fudge read the reports the way a man reads omens he refuses to believe. Minor surges in ambient magic, unusual fluctuations around Hogwarts, incidents without perpetrators, a pattern without a name. Every page suggested the same thing without daring to write it plainly. Something at Hogwarts was changing the rules of the world. Fudge did what he always did when the world felt uncertain. He looked for control. He summoned Amelia Bones first, because she frightened him in the honest way competent people often do. Her eyes moved over the reports without panic, without denial, and when she looked up, she did not soften her voice for him. "This isn't a prank," she said, "and it isn't a schoolboy spell gone wrong." Fudge tried to laugh thinly. "Dumbledore's people exaggerate, they always have." Amelia's expression did not move. "These readings aren't from Dumbledore." That was the first fracture in the Ministry's comfort. Because Dumbledore could be blamed, Dumbledore could be dismissed, but numbers on parchment, pulled from neutral instruments, carried a colder authority. Fudge swallowed and asked the question he had avoided for weeks. "Is it you-know-who?" Amelia paused, just long enough for the fear to settle. "No," she said. "If it were him, we would recognize the shape of it. This is different." Different was worse. Different meant unknown. Unknown meant uncontrollable. That same afternoon, a second meeting took place in a quieter room, one that did not appear on any map and did not require permission to enter. It belonged to those who had learned that governments often arrive too late and that survival depends on moving before the official story is written. Alastair Moody stood with his back to the wall, one magical eye spinning with restless suspicion. Kingsley Shacklebolt listened without interrupting. Remus Lupin looked tired in the bone-deep way only the war-touched could recognize in each other. They had heard whispers of Harry Potter for years, but not like this. Not with this weight. "It doesn't feel like Voldemort," Moody growled, tapping the report with a scarred finger. "But it feels like the kind of thing that makes Voldemort possible." Remus's jaw tightened. "Harry is a child." Moody's laugh was grim. "So was Tom Riddle once." Names fell into silence like stones into deep water. At Hogwarts, Dumbledore watched the castle respond in ways it never had before. The school had always been alive, but now it behaved as though it were guarding something. Corridors tightened, portraits grew cautious. Even the air seemed to hesitate when Harry approached, as if the castle was unsure whether to welcome him or contain him. Harry noticed the change, of course. He noticed everything. He noticed how teachers positioned themselves near exits when he entered a classroom, how students stopped laughing a beat too late, how owls lingered over the great hall longer than necessary, as if listening for a name they were not meant to carry. And then, one evening, as snow pressed against the high windows like a pale hand, an unfamiliar owl landed before Harry's plate with a letter sealed in Ministry red. Harry did not open it immediately. He let it sit there, a small, polite threat in an envelope. Across the hall, Hermione Granger noticed the seal and looked away quickly, pretending she had not. She had no friendship to disguise, no bond to betray. Harry Potter was not part of her world, only a shadow on its edge. But shadows mattered. Shadows often warned of what stood beyond the light. Ron Weasley saw it too and frowned, uneasy, more from instinct than understanding. He could not have explained why the Ministry seal made his stomach tighten. He only knew that official attention rarely brought anything good to anyone who had grown up around stories of war. Harry finally broke the seal. The letter was short, courteous, clinical, a request for a formal evaluation of his well-being and magical stability to be conducted by ministry-appointed observers. Harry read it once, then again, not because the words were complex, but because the intention behind them was. In the quiet that followed, the shadow behind him seemed to deepen, like ink spreading in water. Harry folded the letter with slow precision and slipped it into his robe, as if it were nothing. But the castle felt it, and somewhere far beyond the school, the world had just taken its first official step toward Harry Potter. It would not be the last. Dumbledore did not summon Harry immediately. That would have been the instinct of a man still clinging to control. Instead, he waited, because waiting was the last form of authority he trusted. He summoned Severus Snape. Snape read the ministry letter once, then folded it with precision. "They've noticed," he said. "They've panicked," Dumbledore replied. Snape's eyes darkened. "And panic always becomes policy." Dumbledore nodded. "I want you close to him." "I already am." "Closer," Dumbledore said quietly. Snape did not argue. He understood what was being asked, and he understood how dangerous it was. The castle felt it before the students did. Corridors tightened, portraits watched more carefully. Even the air seemed to hesitate when Harry passed, as if Hogwarts itself were unsure whether to protect him or protect itself from him. Harry noticed, of course. He noticed everything. He noticed the way teachers positioned themselves near doors, the way conversations softened when he entered a room, the way owls lingered too long over the great hall, as though unsure whether to carry what they knew. That evening, a ministry owl landed before him with a letter sealed in red. Harry let it sit untouched. Across the hall, Hermione Granger saw the seal and looked away. She did not know Harry. She had never known him, but she had learned to recognize disturbances in systems, and Harry Potter was no longer behaving like a person. He was behaving like a variable. In the Gryffindor common room, Ron Weasley heard the whispers and pretended not to care. But something about the word ministry tightened his chest. He had grown up around stories of war. He knew what it meant when adults stopped laughing. Harry finally opened the letter, a polite request, clinical, an evaluation of his magical stability. Harry read it twice, not because it was complex, but because the intention behind it was. He folded it and slipped it into his robe. The shadow behind him deepened. The observers arrived 2 days later, not as an attack, as a visit. 4 ministry officials, smiles carefully arranged, led by a woman with eyes trained to measure risk. Dumbledore welcomed them with warmth that did not reach his gaze. "We wish to speak with Mr. Potter," she said. "That may be arranged," Dumbledore replied softly. "And I may decide whether it is wise." "It isn't a request," she answered. Dumbledore held the silence, then inclined his head. "As you wish," he said. "But be careful what you ask of children. They sometimes answer." As Harry was summoned, the castle's torches flickered once, together, like a warning breath. The world had finally stepped close enough to see him, and Harry Potter had never been kind to things that tried to measure him. The interview did not take place in Dumbledore's office. That would have granted it legitimacy. Instead, it was held in a neutral classroom, stripped of banners and portraits, where magic felt thin and carefully restrained. Harry entered alone. Perdita Graves observed him without pretense. She did not smile this time. She did not attempt warmth. She had learned long ago that warmth invited resistance. She wanted clarity. "Mr. Potter," she said, "this is a routine assessment." Harry inclined his head. "There is no such thing." A flicker of irritation crossed her face, quickly buried. "We are concerned about fluctuations surrounding you." Harry glanced at the walls. "The castle fluctuates." One of the officials shifted uncomfortably. Graves pressed on. "Your emotional state, your control, your—" "My stability," Harry finished for her. "You should choose one concern at a time." Silence stretched. Quills hovered, uncertain. Graves tried another approach. "Do you hear voices, Mr. Potter?" Harry considered the question, not the answer. "Everyone does," he said. "Most people ignore the ones that matter." That was enough. Graves closed her folder. "This assessment will continue." Harry met her gaze, unblinking. "Then you will continue without me." When he stood, the air thickened, not violently, not dramatically, but with undeniable pressure. The officials felt it immediately. Their wards trembled. Their confidence thinned. Harry did not threaten them. He simply left. Outside, Hogwarts exhaled. The ministry delegation retreated that evening, not defeated, but unsettled. They carried no conclusions, only uncertainty. And uncertainty, when returned to the ministry, became fear. Fudge received their report in silence. He did not read it aloud. He did not ask questions. He issued orders instead: increased observation, expanded authority, contingency planning. He did not name Harry Potter a threat. He did something worse. He classified him as a variable. At Hogwarts, life continued in imitation of normalcy. Classes resumed, meals were eaten, exams approached, but students began choosing their seats with intention. Teachers adjusted syllabi without explanation. The castle felt narrower. Hermione Granger spent her nights buried in restricted texts she did not yet know how to use. She was not looking for spells. She was mapping systems, ancient wards, magical saturation, feedback loops between place and presence. Harry Potter did not behave like a wizard. He behaved like a constant. Ron Weasley noticed patterns of a different kind: how arguments stopped when Harry entered a room, how bravado collapsed into silence. Ron had grown up with brothers who postured and boasted. Harry did neither, and somehow that was worse. Neither of them approached him. They did not need to. Harry remained distant, deliberate, almost courteous in his isolation. He watched the ministry tighten its grip. He watched the castle respond. He watched people begin to organize themselves around the idea of him. The shadow followed, quiet and precise. Voldemort said little now. Observation had replaced instruction. The student no longer needed lessons. The successor had begun to write his own. And far beyond Hogwarts, plans formed in rooms without windows, spoken by voices that believed history could be managed. They were wrong. History had already found its center, and it was walking the halls of a school that no longer knew whether it was sheltering a student or containing a force. The ministry returned not with more questions, but with a solution. Her name was Dolores Umbridge, and she arrived at Hogwarts wrapped in pink certainty and institutional authority. She called it oversight. The castle called it intrusion. Students felt it immediately: a tightening in the air, a sense that rules were no longer guidance but weapons. Teachers adjusted their posture, conversations shortened, even the ghosts drifted farther from the walls when she passed. Umbridge smiled at everyone, because she believed smiles were shields. She read her decrees aloud with a voice trained to sound kind while removing choices: discipline, order, correct values, words designed to feel harmless until they were enforced. Harry Potter did not react. He sat through her speech without expression. He did not scoff. He did not challenge her. He did not even watch her for long. That unsettled her more than open defiance would have. Umbridge noticed him anyway. She noticed how the room shifted around him, how students stopped whispering when he moved, how even professors avoided unnecessary conflict in his presence. Authority recognized authority, even when it refused to admit it. She summoned him that afternoon. Her office smelled of ink and sweetness meant to soothe. The walls were lined with smiling creatures frozen in porcelain joy. Harry stood in the center of the room like something that did not belong. "Mr. Potter," Umbridge said gently, "I'm here to help Hogwarts return to proper order." "Hogwarts already has one," Harry replied. Her smile tightened. "The Ministry disagrees." Harry tilted his head. "The Ministry is not the castle." Umbridge folded her hands. "You have been the center of disturbances." "Effects," Harry corrected calmly. The air thickened, not violently, precisely. Umbridge leaned forward. "Discipline corrects such things." Harry's gaze remained steady. "Discipline is for those who fear consequence." Silence settled between them, heavy and cold. Umbridge felt it then, not rebellion, not arrogance, but absence. The absence of fear, the absence of submission. "I can make your time here very difficult," she said. Harry answered without raising his voice. "You already have." She slid a parchment toward him. "Mandatory sessions, ministry oversight, official compliance." Harry did not touch it. "No," he said. One word. "Enough." Umbridge's smile did not break, but something beneath it did. "You do not refuse authority." Harry stepped closer, just once. Shadows gathered where his feet touched the floor. "I do," he said quietly, "because I am not under yours." He left without another word. That evening, Umbridge filed reports, pages of concern, recommendations for escalation. She did not write that she was afraid. She wrote that control was required. At the Ministry, those reports landed on desks already crowded with unease. Committees formed, contingencies were discussed. Harry Potter's name was spoken without the word boy attached to it. At Hogwarts, Hermione Granger read Umbridge's decrees like equations. She noted the language, the loopholes, the assumptions. Systems failed not because they were evil, but because they misunderstood what they were attempting to contain. Ron Weasley watched the students instead, how they avoided Harry's path, how arguments dissolved near him. Ron did not know Harry. That was the problem. You could not predict something you did not understand. And Harry remained at the center, distant, deliberate, untouched by the tightening net. He watched the Ministry push closer. He watched Hogwarts react. He watched people begin to organize themselves around the idea of him. The shadow followed, silent and precise, and far beyond the castle walls, the world began preparing for a confrontation it did not yet realize it could not win. Umbridge escalated the way all small authorities escalate when they sense something they cannot dominate. She did not strike Harry Potter directly. She struck the space around him. New rules narrowed movement. Permissions slowed access. Inspections turned privacy into privilege. Hogwarts tightened like a fist, certain that pressure would force compliance. It did not. Harry moved through the restrictions as if they were suggestions. He did not break them openly. He did not resist. He simply made them irrelevant. Staircases aligned at the right moment. Doors opened when they should not. Corridors cleared without instruction. The rules were ink. Harry was gravity. That frightened Umbridge more than rebellion ever could. Rebellion can be punished. Inevitability cannot. So she summoned him again, this time with witnesses. Two Ministry officials stood by the wall. A recording quill hovered between them. "Mr. Potter," Umbridge said sweetly, "this is for your safety, and the school's." Harry remained standing. "You mean control?" Her smile tightened. "I mean stability." Harry glanced at the quill. "Stability is what people demand when they want the world to stop changing." One official shifted uncomfortably. Umbridge ignored it. "You will attend weekly sessions. You will answer questions." "No," Harry said. The quill scratched. Umbridge leaned forward. "There will be consequences." Harry's voice stayed calm. "You should not threaten what you cannot enforce." For the first time, Umbridge reached for pain. Not dramatic, not public, something administrative, something deniable. She slid a small box across the desk. Inside lay a thin black quill. "Detention," she said. "Tonight." Harry took the box and left. That night, he sat in her office. The walls smiled falsely. The air smelled of sugar and control. Umbridge watched with quiet satisfaction. "Right," she said. The sentence waited on the parchment. "I must not defy the ministry." Harry picked up the quill. The first word cut into his skin. Blood formed the letters. Pain rose. Harry did not react. He wrote again, and again. The wound deepened, then stopped abruptly, sealing itself as if his body had rejected the instruction. Umbridge's smile faltered. Harry looked up. "Is this what you came here to do?" he asked, not angry, only curious. "Bleed a child until you feel powerful?" "You will learn respect," Umbridge said, her voice strained. Harry set the quill down carefully. The lights dimmed. The room felt smaller, heavier. The ministry officials stepped back without realizing they had moved. "You wanted proof you could control me," Harry said quietly. "Now you have proof you cannot." The door opened before he touched it. He paused once, just long enough for the silence to settle. "Try that again," he said, "and the castle will decide which of us belongs here." He left. Umbridge remained seated, hands trembling beneath the desk. The recording quill had stopped writing. Elsewhere, Hermione Granger looked at her notes and understood something essential. The ministry's tools were built for people. Harry Potter was no longer behaving like one. And Ron Weasley, staring into the Gryffindor fire, felt an unshakable certainty that something had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. Because when a system chooses pain as its argument, it admits it has already lost. And Harry Potter, walking alone through a corridor that shifted for him, did not look angry. He looked awake. The ministry did not acknowledge the incident. That silence was deliberate. Officially, nothing had gone wrong. No complaints were filed. No reports escalated. Dolores Umbridge continued her duties with the same fixed smile, the same pink authority, the same certainty that denial could still function as control. Unofficially, everything shifted. The observers sent back to London stopped requesting reassurances and started asking for contingencies. Language changed in meetings. Words like monitoring gave way to containment. Harry Potter's name appeared less often, but when it did, it was no longer attached to the word student. At Hogwarts, Umbridge changed tactics again. She did not summon Harry. She avoided him. Instead, she tightened her grip on everyone else. Detentions multiplied, clubs dissolved, gatherings required permission that was never granted. Students learned to lower their voices, to walk in pairs, to stop asking questions. Hogwarts began to feel less like a school and more like a place waiting for something to break. Harry observed this without visible reaction. He did not intervene on behalf of others. He did not make speeches. He did not position himself as a protector. That, more than anything, confused those who still wanted him to fit into familiar roles. Heroes intervened, rebels retaliated. Harry did neither. He watched the system expose itself. Hermione Granger noticed the pattern before anyone else. Not the cruelty, that was obvious, but the structure beneath it. Umbridge's authority depended entirely on process, forms, approvals, recorded compliance. If the system failed to produce documentation, it could not justify action. Power without paperwork, Hermione realized, terrified bureaucracies. She began mapping the rules, not to break them, but to understand where they collapsed under their own weight. Every decree referenced another decree. Every authority deferred to a clause. The system was tall, rigid, and hollow. Ron Weasley saw something different. He watched people. How students flinched when Umbridge's voice echoed down a corridor. How teachers chose silence over confrontation. How fear moved faster than orders. Ron understood instinctively what Hermione would later articulate. Fear spreads laterally. Courage does not. And Harry stood apart from all of it, not above, apart. He attended classes as required. He spoke when spoken to. He complied with the letter of every rule while ignoring its spirit entirely. Umbridge could not punish him without acknowledging him, and acknowledging him meant admitting she was afraid. The shadow followed him, precise and patient. Voldemort watched through fractured reflection with something like restrained awe. This was not domination. This was erosion. Harry was not tearing down the system. He was letting it collapse under the weight of its own contradictions. The Ministry felt the pressure increase. Fudge convened private meetings now, excluding those who asked too many questions. He demanded solutions that did not involve Dumbledore and results that did not involve Voldemort. He wanted something clean, something final. What if, someone suggested carefully, we remove him from Hogwarts? The room went quiet. No, Fudge said after a moment, that would make him visible. Visibility was dangerous. Symbols attracted loyalty. Martyrs invited stories. Harry Potter needed to remain contained within procedure, but procedure was already failing. Back at Hogwarts, Umbridge stood alone in her office one evening, staring at a stack of unfiled reports. For the first time, she wondered, not whether Harry Potter could be controlled, but whether the attempt itself was destabilizing the institution she had come to protect. She dismissed the thought immediately. Doubt was weakness. Harry Potter, walking the castle corridors as night settled, felt the world narrowing, not closing in, but aligning. He sensed pressure points forming, lines of force converging towards something inevitable. He did not know what shape the end would take. He only knew that it would not be accidental. And somewhere, watching him from across a room without ever speaking to him, Ron Weasley began to realize a quiet, unsettling truth. Whatever Harry Potter was becoming, the world was teaching itself how to respond. The real shift began far from Hogwarts, deep beneath the Ministry of Magic, in the Department of Mysteries. There, instruments older than policy and immune to denial had begun to register something they could not classify. Not a spell, not a curse, a distortion. Magical density tightening around a single point, warping probability itself. The reports avoided names. Names implied control. They referred instead to an anomalous constant, a presence that did not act, but altered outcomes simply by existing. When Cornelius Fudge was briefed, he listened only long enough to ask the wrong question. Is it dangerous? The unspeakable who answered spoke carefully. Not in the way you mean. It doesn't seek harm. It creates inevitability. That answer terrified him. The Ministry responded as ministries always do when faced with what they cannot understand. They chose isolation, reduce contact, limit movement, constrict influence until the anomaly had nothing left to affect. New instructions were sent to Hogwarts, quietly, procedurally. Umbridge enforced them with visible relief. Curfews tightened, student gatherings dissolved, access became conditional. Hogwarts began to feel less like a school and more like a controlled environment. Harry observed. He did not resist. That absence of reaction was misread as compliance. In truth, Harry was studying the shape of the pressure. Restrictions revealed structure. Structure revealed weak points. He moved through the new rules with precision, obeying where obedience changed nothing, ignoring where attention would have been wasted. Hermione Granger felt the change immediately, not the cruelty, but the logic beneath it. She copied decrees late into the night, mapping references, tracing authority chains. The system was rigid, layered, and fragile. It relied on documentation, not truth. Ron Weasley watched people instead. How fear traveled faster than orders, how silence replaced jokes, how students glanced down corridors not for teachers, but for Harry, uncertain whether his presence meant protection or disaster. Harry remained distant from all of them. He did not recruit. He did not inspire. He did not explain. He continued to exist as a fixed point around which the castle adjusted. One evening, long after curfew, a ward at the edge of the grounds flickered. Just once, brief enough to be dismissed, significant enough to be recorded. Dumbledore noticed. He stood at his window, watching the air above the lake ripple as if something had tested the boundary and withdrawn. Not an attack, a probe. He felt the castle responding, shifting its balance inward. This was not invasion. It was compression. That same night, Harry returned to the chamber. The fractured mirror greeted him in silence. Voldemort's reflection emerged slowly, restrained, observant. "They are attempting containment," Voldemort said. "Yes," Harry replied. "They believe restriction will weaken you." Harry's gaze did not change. "Restriction creates pressure." A pause. "And pressure," Voldemort said carefully, "creates fractures." Harry inclined his head slightly. Doors. Above them, Hogwarts listened, because while the Ministry believed it was tightening a cage, Harry Potter was learning where the structure would break. And somewhere in the castle, Hermione underlined a sentence in her notes twice, as if writing it made it real. "This is not a battle of power, it is a failure of systems." Ron Weasley stared into the common room fire and felt a quiet certainty settle in his chest. Harry Potter did not look like someone trying to win. He looked like someone becoming unavoidable. The Ministry made its next move with a method it trusted more than spells. It sent paperwork. Decrees arrived in stacks, each one written in the same polite language, each one narrowing life at Hogwarts by another inch. Umbridge pinned them up with the satisfaction of someone watching a world become smaller. She believed the school would adapt. She believed children would comply. She believed fear would do what authority could not. And fear did spread. But it did not spread the way she expected. It began to rearrange loyalties. Students stopped gathering in open places and started meeting in corners the rules had not yet named. Teachers learned to speak in glances. Even the portraits became cautious, choosing silence over comment whenever Umbridge walked by. Hogwarts was not obedient, it was becoming strategic. Harry watched all of it without stepping forward. He did not lead, he did not recruit, he did not claim responsibility. That absence made him larger in people's minds, not smaller. When a force refuses to announce itself, it becomes myth. Umbridge, however, did not believe in myths. She believed in leverage, so she chose targets she considered safe, the ones near the anomaly, the ones whose fear might pull him into reaction. She could not control Harry directly, so she would control the world around him and wait for him to move. That afternoon, she confiscated books from the library, restricted volumes, advanced works, anything she could label inappropriate. She did it publicly, with witnesses, because humiliation was a tool. Hermione Granger stood very still as a stack of books was taken from her table. She did not protest. She did not plead. She simply watched Umbridge's hands, noting the exact titles, the exact categories, the exact logic used to justify removal. Hermione did not respond emotionally. She responded mentally. Across the room, Harry passed through the doorway, saw the scene, and continued walking as if it did not exist. Umbridge's eyes sharpened. That was not the reaction she wanted. She wanted anger. She wanted defense. She wanted proof of attachment. But Harry did not play the role, so Umbridge shifted again. She announced a new requirement: student interviews, individual assessments, questions framed as care, designed as extraction. She would collect information the way one collects evidence, building a case for escalation. The first students called were not the loudest, they were the quietest, the observant ones, the ones who might have noticed something about Harry without being noticed themselves. Hermione's name appeared on the list. Ron Weasley's name appeared beneath it. They were summoned separately. Different times, different rooms. Umbridge believed separation prevented coordination. She did not understand that coordination was not friendship, it was pattern recognition. Hermione entered the interview room and saw the quill hovering. She saw the Ministry seal. She saw the smile. Umbridge asked gentle questions about school, about safety, about Harry Potter. Hermione answered truthfully and carefully. She said she did not know him well. She said he was isolated. She said she had no personal insight. All of that was true. What she did not say was the only thing that mattered. Harry's influence was measurable, not socially, structurally. Umbridge asked, "Do you feel afraid around him?" Hermione paused. "I feel uncertainty," she said, "and uncertainty changes people." That answer annoyed Umbridge. It was too intelligent, too slippery. Ron's interview went differently. Umbridge asked the same questions, but Ron's responses carried something Hermione's did not: instinct. He didn't analyze, he felt. "I don't know him," Ron admitted, "but people act weird around him." Umbridge leaned forward. "Weird how?" Ron frowned. Like, like they're waiting for something." That made Umbridge's smile tighten, because waiting implied expectation, and expectation implied inevitability. After the interviews, Hermione returned to her notes, but her handwriting had changed, tighter, faster. She had learned something important. The Ministry was no longer investigating, it was preparing. Ron returned to the common room and sat by the fire in silence, feeling the same certainty he had felt before. The adults were choosing their battle lines, and they were doing it without understanding what stood on the other side. And Harry, still at the center, still distant, felt the school compressing, not because he cared about the decrees, but because he could feel the pressure building toward a snap. Umbridge believed she was tightening a net, Hogwarts was becoming a trap, and Harry Potter was already deciding what would happen when it finally closed. The Ministry stopped pretending the situation was temporary. That was the moment everything hardened. A sealed directive arrived at Hogwarts at dawn, carried by an owl that did not linger. Umbridge read it alone in her office, her smile fading not into fear, but into calculation. The language was no longer educational, it was logistical. Authority chains were clarified, emergency powers referenced. Hogwarts was no longer being supervised, it was being prepared. Umbridge did not announce the change, she implemented it. Patrols increased. Detentions became mandatory rather than corrective. Student movement was tracked. The castle resisted where it could, doors sticking, staircases misaligning. But even Hogwarts could not fight paperwork indefinitely. Harry felt the shift immediately, not as threat, as intent. The pressure was no longer exploratory, it was directional. The system had decided that uncertainty itself was unacceptable. Harry adjusted. He reduced his presence, shorter appearances, less visibility. He did not hide, he redistributed himself. When he was absent, the tension grew worse. When he appeared, it settled. People began to understand, without saying it aloud, that Harry's presence functioned like a stabilizer. That realization terrified the Ministry. Hermione Granger confirmed it with numbers. She charted incidents against Harry's location. Fluctuations aligned with absence. Calm followed proximity. This was not influence. It was correlation. She did not share the conclusion. Not yet. Ron Weasley noticed something simpler. When Harry walked into a room, arguments ended. When he left, they restarted. Ron had no framework for that kind of effect, but he understood one thing clearly. Removing Harry would not restore order. It would remove the only thing holding it together. That evening, Umbridge authorized a controlled test. Harry was assigned an extended restriction, confined to specific corridors, required to report his location, officially for student welfare, in practice to observe the effect of limiting his movement. The castle reacted within hours. Magic misfired. Portraits argued. Students grew restless. A minor duel escalated too quickly. A ward near the greenhouses collapsed and had to be reinforced manually. Umbridge watched the reports pile up, her quill scratching faster. This was not compliance. This was destabilization. She removed the restriction before midnight and recorded the reversal as administrative correction. The disturbances stopped. That was the moment Umbridge understood she was no longer dealing with a subject. She was dealing with a load-bearing element. At the Ministry, the Department of Mysteries updated its internal models. The anomaly was no longer isolated, it was integrated. Removing it caused system-wide failure. One unspeakable wrote a single line at the bottom of the report: "Do not attempt extraction without full collapse contingency." Fudge did not read that far. At Hogwarts, Dumbledore stood in the astronomy tower long after curfew, watching the stars wheel overhead with their usual indifference. He felt the school holding itself together around a single point, and wondered for the first time whether saving the world would require breaking the thing it had begun to orbit. Harry stood alone in a corridor below, feeling the same truth from the opposite direction. They are aligning now, he thought. The system, the people, the end. The shadow at his back remained still, waiting. The world did not end. That was the problem. Everything the ministry had done assumed catastrophe would announce itself. Explosions, riots, a visible enemy. Instead, what followed was balance. Uneasy, artificial, maintained. Hogwarts settled into a fragile calm that felt borrowed rather than earned. Classes resumed, decrees remained posted. Umbridge smiled again. On paper, the system was holding. Harry knew better. He felt the alignment complete itself, not dramatically, quietly, like a final piece sliding into place. The pressure no longer moved outward, it moved inward. The world had finished testing him. It had begun adapting around him. Hermione Granger felt it too, though she could not have named it yet. Her models stopped shifting. The variables stabilized. That frightened her more than chaos ever had. Systems that stopped changing were systems approaching saturation. She closed her notebook for the first time in weeks without writing a conclusion. Ron Weasley noticed something else: Harry's absence. Not physical, Harry still walked the corridors, but something about him had withdrawn, as if he had stepped half a pace out of the world everyone else occupied. Ron did not know Harry, but he knew distance, and this distance felt intentional. That night, the castle did something it had not done since its founding. It chose. The wards did not flare. The alarms did not sound. Instead, Hogwarts subtly rearranged itself. Paths shortened, doors aligned, corridors that had never connected before did. A silent geometry formed beneath the stone, responding not to spellwork, but to presence. Harry felt it immediately, not as welcome, as acknowledgement. He stopped walking. For the first time since his awakening, he hesitated. The shadow behind him did not move, because it was no longer leading, it was following. Far below, in the chamber, the fractured mirror shimmered without being summoned. Voldemort's reflection emerged slowly, studying Harry with something like restraint. "They have adjusted," Voldemort said. "Yes," Harry replied. "They are afraid." Harry considered this. "They are preparing." A pause. "For what?" Voldemort asked. Harry did not answer immediately, because the truth was not fully formed yet, only its shape. At the ministry, a sealed file was opened for the first time, not marked Potter, not marked threat, marked instead with a classification no one liked to use. Event. Inside it, one sentence had been added in careful ink. "The anomaly has integrated. Direct opposition is no longer viable." The unspeakables read it in silence. Fudge never saw it. At Hogwarts, Umbridge sat alone in her office, smiling at nothing, convincing herself she had restored order. She did not notice the way the walls seemed to lean away from her now. She did not hear the castle breathe without her permission. And Harry Potter stood at the center of it all, finally understanding what the alignment meant. The world was no longer reacting to him. It was reorganizing around what came next. He closed his eyes, and for the first time, he chose not to act, because whatever followed would not be a reaction, it would be a decision. And when Harry Potter opened his eyes again, the story would no longer belong to Hogwarts alone. If you want to follow what comes next, you can subscribe. Part 2 will continue this story. Thank you for listening.